Hello, and welcome to our webinar series on the 8 professional competencies for preventing drug misuse among college students. I'm Rich Lucy, Senior Prevention Program Manager in the Drug Enforcement Administration's Community Outreach and Prevention Support section. DEA is pleased to be part of this project to highlight the skills necessary for coordinating comprehensive campus efforts to prevent drug use. While we have made significant progress with these issues over recent decades, much more remains to be done. The foundation for this webinar series is a publication prepared by Dr. David Anderson, Professor Emeritus of Education and Human Development at George Mason University. The document was produced with funding from the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center, which is funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. DEA is pleased to continue its partnership and collaboration with SAMHSA and its Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. Over the course of these 8 webinars, we take a deeper dive into each of the core competencies that are designed to promote enhanced professional skills and ultimately affect college students' decisions surrounding drugs and alcohol. This 5th episode focuses on program management. This webinar highlights, among other things, oversight and implementation of the campus's efforts to prevent alcohol and drug misuse among its students, including attention to staff, resources, advisory groups and task forces, and extensive collaboration. Additionally, you will learn how program management incorporates organizational structure, coalition building, and the engagement of key campus individuals and groups, such as student leaders, student groups, and faculty. It's important to keep in mind that program management also contributes to preparedness of prevention practitioners on campus, which helps to maintain current knowledge, consistent messaging, and engaged audiences. It's our hope you and your campus benefit from the information being shared in this webinar. We think you'll find many ways to put the insights and contents to good use. With that, it's my pleasure to turn over today's episode to our host, Dr. David Anderson.
Thanks so much, Rich. Appreciate that kind introduction, and thanks to you and all your colleagues for all the good work you've been doing over the years and continuing to do to help address drug issues across our country. Thank you also to you and again your colleagues for sponsoring this webinar series. As you've highlighted, we've made a lot of progress over recent decades. This is vitally important work. But you've also highlighted that we have a lot more work to do. And that's why we've come up with this new resource, the Guide to the 8 Professional Competencies for Higher Education Substance Abuse Prevention. To do this work, I convened 5 experts from across the country with different areas of expertise. And we focused on the knowledge, the skills, and the applications to do our work on our campuses and to do it effectively and more efficiently. We've made this resource, this free resource, available at www.preventioncompetencies.org. It's also on your website, and many other associations are sharing this resource. So with this, we have the 5 experts who are talking about their insights, their experience, their tips on these different 8 areas. Today, we're talking about, as you've introduced, the 5th of these competencies, program management. And who could be better to do this than Joan Masters? Joan serves as the project director of Missouri's Partners in Prevention. It's a statewide network of 24 colleges and universities. It's a great network. It's been around for a long time. And now we want to hear from Joan. I'm going to ask a series of questions and get your insight that you can share. And again, to bring to life the competency area called program management. So welcome, Joan. Glad you're here.
Good to be here.
So let's talk about a little bit about your background and as it relates to specifically program management and anything else you want, your background a little bit, please.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I have worked with Missouri Partners in Prevention, which is the statewide substance misuse prevention coalition in the state of Missouri for the past 22 years. It's actually been my only professional job. Um,
Wow.
and right out of grad school, I started working with Missouri Partners in Prevention. And so over the past 22 years, my role has been supporting the work that our campuses are doing and the professionals on those campuses are doing to implement evidence-based strategies, to use the tools and the resources they have to provide updated training and technical assistance, and to keep them abreast of the work that's happening in substance misuse prevention. Over time, we've expanded the coalition to the issues that are intersectional to substance misuse, like violence prevention, working on mental health and suicidality, sexual health, and other issues that we know students are engaging in, but our core has been substance misuse prevention, particularly drugs. And it's important for me, before anything else, that our campuses and the professionals that work on these campuses, which often don't have a background in substance misuse prevention, they come from a variety of fields. Maybe they've worked in prevention before, but at the high school level or in the general adult population, like at a health department, maybe they come from student affairs. We've had folks that have inherited prevention work on their campus and they come from the clergy or the ministry. And so they're not yet aware of the science, the prevention science that we use to implement substance misuse prevention. And I think it's really essential to me that those folks understand that program management, or managing the work that we do as we implement evidence-based strategies, is sort of the core of what we do, and having a base of those skills and those competencies is really important. So really, honestly, of all the competencies, this is the one I probably spend the most on in terms of coaching our campuses, so that I can then also teach them more about strategic planning, more about prevention science, more about the issues related to alcohol and other drugs. So
Excellent. So what you've done, you've highlighted several things that I think are really, really important, and at least mean to the second question. But before I get there, one of the things you highlighted is, and you know this from our discussions over the year of building this competencies document, the uniqueness of the higher education setting.
mhm.
And then the uniqueness or the differences, you talked about intersectionality already, but about drugs and alcohol. So sure, there's skills that we talk about, and I know Rich highlighted this with this, and we're talking about the health enhancing environment, and here we're talking about program management as the topic of today. But the issue is a lot of those skills, whether it's leadership or evaluation, we use in other areas. But there's a lot of unique issues with drugs and alcohol. And then again, to your point earlier, the uniqueness in the higher education setting. So with this in mind, with this health enhancing environment theme in mind, talk about, if you would, program management, where it fits. You said, it's vitally important. So tell us more. How does that fit? I mean, tell us about program management and its importance in the group of 8, if you will.
So I tend to think a lot about capacity in my work, in the ways in which I work with my campuses. They can't implement anything unless they have the resources and the readiness to build capacity. And I feel like program management in all of the pieces of that particular competency is encouraging us to develop the capacity of our campus to implement the work that we do. I think you and I have talked before that sometimes people, they inherit substance misuse prevention on their campus and they go straight to the program.
Right.
I was on this other campus and they did this thing and it was fun, but they don't think about the strategy behind it, which goes into obviously the other competencies that our colleagues will be talking about during this series. But for me, program management is like taking a step back. It's thinking about how we act strategically, which, while I know there is another competency about strategic planning, to me, it's different. Strategic planning is one thing, but acting strategically and planning for implementation in a strategic way also involves thinking about the resources that we have, what those resources, like, especially if they're human resources, what they know about prevention, what training they need, the focus on cultural humility and the work that we do in the listening to the voices of the people that we serve. Again, those are all underpinnings that are going to lead to our success. So if we don't manage appropriately, we're never going to implement successfully. And so that's kind of why I think it's really kind of a pillar, if you will, or a foundational competency to the work that the other competencies encourage us to do.
Yeah, and so here you're talking using the word intersectionality again. You talk about the intersection of these 8 areas. I mean, you yeah, that's so now here's an unfair sorry, it's an unfair question. You know, you were part of helping develop, the program management and the whole document, but then this one really jumped out. I mean, you're the one who's doing it. You're dealing with 24 campuses and growing, I'm sure. There's 9 competencies here. Is there one that, or two? The answer cannot be all 9. But so what jumps out and what's really core? I mean, you've already highlighted some of the pieces of these. What's really core for you, or a couple or 3?
So I think, and I'll kind of cheat my answer. I think honestly, the answer is I really like all of them because I feel like they come down to 3 categories. And so
okay.
To me, the like recruit varied personnel, maintain quality personnel, and involve key individuals. That's that capacity building piece of the resources and the readiness that we build in order to do our work. So we mentioned in the competencies that shared responsibility is really important. Our campuses cannot be successful if one person is tasked with this work or only one person wants to take credit for the work that we do. We didn't get to the place that we are with the problems of substance misuse prevention because one person did something that was unhealthy. And so therefore we can't solve it in the same way. My campuses use a lot of the collective impact theory in their work, thinking about the fact that we are all really interconnected in these very complex social issues, and alcohol and other drugs, especially on a higher education campus. You mentioned like just the difference of higher education. We have the difference of we have students who are under the age of 21 and over the age of 21. While we are working with students that are allowed to use at a certain age, and even for drugs, like in my state, cannabis in some cases is legal to be used by those over 21. We also are dealing with the adolescent brain. And so we really have to think about who we bring to help us on campus, to help us implement the direction that we're doing, the strategic planning we're doing, the understanding of the prevention science, and we sort of bring all that together. I also think there's a very not subtle, very clear theme in the competencies of lifelong learning. And we see that come together in the competency related to incorporating current information and conducting professional development. And so I cheated and said that I think they're all important, but to me, the piece of capacity building and lifelong learning is really, really key. And I think so many of our competencies really fall into those 2 themes.
That's great. That's fine. And I want to dive a little deeper into the whole capacity piece, because I think all too often on campuses, people think generally, hey, it's great we have an office dealing with drug and alcohol issues. Hey, it's great we have a coordinator. Is that what you're talking about with capacity? Or is it,
It's definitely broader than that.
Okay, so can you talk about how do we build, how specifically, what are some ideas or maybe some examples about building capacity? I mean, yeah, if you're going to hire personnel, that's probably within your purview, but of an office or a division. But I think you're also talking about some training that are not your employees. So can you talk about some examples of that?
Sure. So to kind of go back a little bit, to me, and how I train when I train my campuses is based on capacity being resources and readiness that fit together. So a campus, I work with a lot of campuses that are like this, they can throw money at anything. They can find office space, they can hire people, but when that person gets in that role and they have that great big budget and they want to do something that's evidence-based, that challenges maybe tradition or norms or maybe even political will in the state, they get stopped. And so that is not having correct capacity. That's having a lot of money to throw at a problem. So that's why resources, which are all those people that we have to meet with readiness. And readiness is where we have the relationships that we build with others, the relationships we build with administrators, the training that we do with others. And so a long time ago when I was a young professional, I remember going to several sessions with our friend and colleague, Pat Fabiano from Washington. And she used to always talk about those values of those 100 cups of coffee. And the fact that I always tell my campuses that please never invite a person you have never met to a coalition meeting without going to meet them in their office first, having a cup of coffee with them, taking a walk on campus, introducing yourself at a meeting, and just asking them, would they like to be a member of the coalition and what do they think is the key issues on campus related to substance misuse or violence or whatever it is that you're building a coalition or relationships on. And once you start to hear their answers, you can identify what win-wins you can develop with that person or with their office. You can find out like what motivates them. Is it power and clout? Is it money? Is it access? Is it experience? And then you can tie what you ask them to do or how you ask them to engage with your strategic work and your evidence-based work together so that you're not just asking the same thing of all people. We're all very different people. We're all motivated by different things, depending on where we're at in our career, how much we get paid, where we want to go, in our futures, what background we've had. We have folks on campus who have been personally touched by substance misuse. And so when we build capacity, we have to think about those relationships because those relationships are going to potentially get us in the door somewhere. They're going to allow us to maybe present at an orientation session or be included in some curriculum that's being implemented on campus. They might help us get an in with a policymaker on campus or a policymaker within our community because those two people go to church together or those two people are in a civic organization together. So the more we find out about the people that we have and what their assets are, and we do that sort of power mapping around what those people have to give us, the stronger our work can be. And that takes time. That's often not something that people want to do, but managing that and making that a transformational environment for our colleagues is really the key to especially making the hard work a little bit easier.
Yeah. So that's very helpful. You mentioned the word, I think it was like obstacle. So in terms of getting this moved forward, what are some of the obstacles? And then maybe dovetailing with that is, who are some of the hardest to reach in terms of building your coalition? Who are some of because that's all of this dovetails right back into the program management of whatever you're doing strategically on your campus. So yeah. Obstacles and hard to reach.
So I think some obstacles definitely can be ourselves and our own bias about our partners and what we think they will allow us to do, what we think we know about them. I found some partners that one would typically think are not a workable partner because we think about them in their role or their job, not realizing that as an individual human being, they're actually a very good partner and a very good colleague or someone to be able to move us forward. So I think in some ways our our bias, or maybe even our thought that we're not going to be supported by our administrators in making those relationships. That could definitely be there. Right now, I'm seeing on our campuses a lot of lack of administrative buy-in. Really stopping professionals from doing the hard work before it starts, because it is tricky, it is political. And instead of what I would hope that administrators would do, that instead of stopping the work, that we'd help our substance abuse prevention professionals understand why we should maybe tread a little bit more lightly, or think about, okay, maybe we can't engage that particular person in this particular way. What other partners are out there? I feel like we run up against a lot of brick walls, but really it should be more like a maze. It might be difficult and we might run into corners, but there should still be another way out. And I think that, ultimately, our work on campus when it comes to program management is so important, to just keep track of what we're doing, of thinking about the work that we do as both systemic and strategic. And so if we think about the work that we do as just like planning another event, like a checklist or a to-do list, we're truly not transforming the environment. We're really engaging in more transactional leadership, where we're checking things off a to-do list. And so some of the barriers that we have are folks thinking that like we just plan fun events and we just do didactic educational experiences and we can get anyone to do that, where really I think we need to make the case for why what we do is important, and tie it back to what the institutional outcomes are overall, like retention or moving students along in the educational process, like our 2-year institutions and things like that.
So couple of things with that, and then we'll move to the next question.
Mhm.
I'm going to hold up both of these again. You're talking about how program management contributes to the intentionality of that health enhancing environment, however you define for your campus at this point in time, health enhancing environment. Mm-hmm. And I know we as an advisory group we struggled with what's at the center, how do we want to articulate what's at the center? So, and then the other piece in the document as a whole, just so that it's very clear, because again, you're saying it without using this word, this is all aspirational. All of these 8 competencies, and then honing in on program management itself. It's not, as you just said, just doing those events or those things. It's how do those contribute to your overall strategic plan, your overall vision, your overall mission. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, and I'll just add here that I think that the substance abuse prevention professional on campus often is supervised or mentored by a variety of folks on campus. Yeah. Some of which have never worked in this field, some of which who have never worked in something that is as hard and transformational as substance misuse prevention. So, part of this competency is really thinking about our professional development needs and engaging ourselves as lifelong learners. And so I often recommend to folks to keep the main things. I have the socio-ecological framework, the strategic prevention framework posted above my computer so that I remember why I'm doing what I'm doing in the strategic way I'm doing it. But I have learned those things because I have found myself I've had good supervisors that have encouraged me to continue to get training and continue to learn. I've found myself outside educational experiences. And I also have not just thought about engaging in professional development related to alcohol and drugs or substance misuse specifically. I've thought about finding myself reading and technical assistance material related to building relationships and building capacity, even if it's about, building capacity within a business organization or a sales book. A lot of the capacity building, a lot of the program management we do is actually based in, some business principles. And so I think it's important just to say here that, the health promoting environment, we need to understand what that means, why it's important for a college campus to have a health promoting environment. But sometimes we have folks with MPHs who understand that perfectly, but they've never had the business acumen or the business side of building those relationships, developing win-win, understanding why capacity is important when building human relationships and using human resources. And so maybe that's a need for our prevention professional to look at, to get better in the work that they do and have that sense of lifelong learning.
Yeah. And that goes, what you've just said there goes right back to what Rich said in the opening, where he said, we've made a lot of progress, but we have a lot more to do. I mean, and that's the point. We can do much better. We've learned a lot over the last decades, but let's push it further. So can you talk a little bit about some other examples on any of these areas or globally about program management? Maybe some examples where there was good intention, good theory, but it didn't work, or how do you retool? How do you keep, you talked earlier about taking care of yourself so that that's not an obstacle. Just any of these that help bring program management even more to life.
Sure. I mean, I believe really strongly in, developing a sort of a checklist or a list for myself of new partners I can be developing and people I can get to know. And so I often teach our campuses to make a list of people that they've never met on campus or concerns they have about the campus environment and trying to identify which people might be interested in that topic, and then make an effort to meet 2 new people a month on campus, or make an effort to get to know someone better on campus, not because we want to invite them to a coalition meeting, that might be the ultimate goal, but just again to ask them like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee at the campus, cafe? Can we sit down? I'm working on this project and I'd love to pick your brain. And we can develop then that relationship so we can figure out maybe how to work better together. We can hear other voices. So just that like intentionality of building those relationships. I think that I've also had a lot of young professionals that have been thrown into as many conferences and training opportunities as possible, and they don't know what to do with the information once they get it. And so while I think, again, we have the resources part of readiness, we have a lot of money potentially on a campus to send a lot of people to conferences. But if we don't then ask that professional when they get back, what have you learned? What are you going to put into practice? What do you still need more information on? To me, that can be a direct failure of this program management competency if we don't take the opportunity to coach our young professionals or our new professionals in the field about what they learned, how they'll apply it, and give them opportunities to apply the work that they do. In Missouri Partners in Prevention, we have something called a coalition building toolkit, which it truly walks people through like what questions to ask new partners, how to run a coalition meeting, what is a sample agenda of a coalition meeting. And I think employing resources like that and bringing intentionality to the work that we do, knowing people more than just what their name and their title is on their name badge, are all just examples that we can try and build, which is sometimes difficult for folks, but it's ultimately, I was just talking to a campus the other day about this. It's truly, they're wondering like, why can't I get any buy-in? Why are people not engaging with me? They haven't held a coalition meeting or met with a coalition partner without asking them for something in 8 months. And so it's all been about, what do I need? What do I need? And that's not how we build good relationships. That's not how we would work with a friendship or a romantic partner. So we have to think about these relationships as being healthy in the same way, where there's something for both of us in the relationship to move forward.
So out of that, I mean, I've heard the word intentionality a lot, which is great. And I love the idea of, you know, let me go talk with 2 new people this month. I mean, that's very intentional. But embedded in what you're saying, also, I'm hearing reflective, meaning step back, think about the overall vision, think about how can you, innovate, and if you go back to the, that health enhancing environment and thinking of innovation, and like because part of what you're saying is it all fits together with program management. That's where the rubber hits the road. Thinking about how do we do communication better? Well, maybe we should, look at the webinar on communication, but no, seriously, on our own campuses, who knows communication better than communication and marketing folks? Who knows needs assessment, evaluation, and research better than those folks? How about leadership? Maybe we go meet 2 people, someone who's in a leadership role. You may not have coalition on your mind for them, but you're learning about leadership opportunities for the campus.
Sure.
For an office on the campus. So just thinking a little non-traditionally, again, that's part of intentionality, blending intentionality and reflectiveness. If that seems fair to you from what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I think like the concept of power mapping, or thinking about what what relationships a person has, what skills they have. I've met a lot of people that are really excellent at relationship building or graphic design, or they understand marketing principles. They happen to right now be the academic advisor for the Career Center, but that doesn't mean that they didn't have. We had a Title IX coordinator at a campus that was an incredibly gifted communications professional because her background was in graphic design. And so but again, if we only said, well, I'm going to invite Mary, who is the Title IX officer, because I only want to hear what her experience is with violence on campus, we fail to see that person underneath. And so, I mean, I think that you're spot on in terms of kind of keeping a record, but also reflecting on what those relationships can mean.
Yeah, but also reflecting when the person goes for training and coming back and how might I use this, and then reflecting of, why do I feel stymied or stalled, or why do I feel obstacles trying to implement what I just learned in training last week?
Right.
And what you're saying here, without using these words, again, you can affirm or deny, unlocking the potential of what you can be doing. That's what I'm hearing from what you're doing as Partners in Prevention. So as we move, we're moving towards wrapping this up, but thinking about the audiences that are listening to this webinar, are there some specific sub-audiences that you have a specific message for? I mean, it could be whether it's campus leadership or boards of trustees, it may be student athletics, it may be our fraternity sorority community, student leadership, faculty, staff. Is there some message to any of those or about any of those that, or something else that you'd like to highlight, specific audience or subgroup?
Yeah, I think with all due respect to all of our campus partners on campus, IT would not appreciate me coming in and updating any computers, and athletics would not appreciate me coming over and trying to determine whether a athlete is NCAA compliant. And that is because we all have specialty areas. That doesn't mean that we should be in these functional silos where no one cooperates, but we need to respect the work and the specialty areas that all of us have. I think sometimes we don't have respect for the substance abuse prevention professional on campus, sometimes because they don't come at this work because they have had a tremendous amount of background or experience. And so I have honestly never seen before more people who think they can do the job of substance abuse prevention professionals without any training than we see right now. There's a lot of, oh, this is easy. I know programming and it's just programming, or I know education, it's just education. I know how to adjudicate policy and that's all that it is. prevention is a science, and we see that coming through these competencies. And I think just overall, these competencies are incredibly important. So to our colleagues that are our partners, are maybe inheriting some substance abuse prevention work on their campus, I think it's respecting the fact that this is a body of work. It is a science, and therefore, there's training available. I have never met a more patient group of folks in terms of colleagues, because we all kind of figured, nobody grew up and said, I want to be a substance abuse prevention professional in higher education. I have never met a single person of that, because it's not something you think about when you're going through school, or, so we've all learned this at different points in time, and we've all had different mentors, and we've all, gone through the process of learning, but we've also been disrespected in our fields a lot, and not understanding that this is professional work, this is science-based work. So I think what I want everyone to know is that these competencies are made because we want to professionalize we've always been professionals, but we want you to know that this is professional work. So I think that that's just really key, and that there are so many resources for folks who are coming into prevention science from maybe other fields like athletics, like residence life, like conduct, to help them learn about what it is. And they will have a lot of colleagues meeting them on the other side of the fence to welcome them and to train them and mentor them, et cetera.
Yeah, your message there is you're not out there doing this alone. Your earlier message tied into that is building the coalition, building your campus partners, and your, of course, title Missouri Partners in Prevention says that all. But the other piece is, and just to step back as the five of you and myself help build this competencies guide, we're also standing on the shoulders of others. It's not like the six of us were in a room and we created these. We build them on our decades of experience. And again, in the guide itself, just on program management, we have these resources. We didn't do all the resources. We did the top resources and then segmented those, the very top and then the rest. There's lots of resources out there. So with that in mind, as we start to close, is there anything else, any core messages that maybe you didn't get to say, or that you want to say now, or you want to reemphasize? Anything else you want to say in closing?
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time talking about capacity and those resources and readiness, but I think what else is really key to the program management capacity is the importance of cultural humility, and the fact that we are never done learning about the people that we are serving. We're never done learning from the people that we are serving. And there's no, the reason why we have switched the word from cultural competence, which sounds like you get a certificate and you put it on your wall and you're done, you're competent, to cultural humility, is because it is a growth process that you're never done growing through. And just like I'm encouraging others to see our work as professional and professionalized, cultural humility is something that us as prevention professionals need to adapt and use throughout our careers, from the very first day to the very last day. And some of us who are even working into retirement, right, is always asking, what are we not understanding about the communities we're serving, listening to their voices, understanding that we might not know it all, that we might have bias that maybe we're not checking appropriately as we're moving forward about others and about specific groups that we're working with. And so even if we had to separate out a particular professional development need for all of us, if we are choosing not to engage in any professional development for a time period, at least using that professional development space to learn about others, and especially the subpopulations that are marginalized that we work with, to recognize the fact that most of the things that we have accessible to us to read are often based on the experiences of white cis people that are reflected in the research. And so really having that lifelong learner lens on, even if it's just about culture and the way culture influences prevention is really a very important thing that we can do.
And I think that's critical. And 2 points there. That cultural humility for this point in time, from where each of us is, but then the other part is it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
Culture is shifting. And so staying up to date with, again, that cultural humility as various needs shift in 2024, 2025, 2030, continuing to learn, continuing to adapt so that we meet our ultimate goal of being effective with substance misuse prevention.
Absolutely.
So closing words from you, anything.
I'm really, really proud to have a very small part in this. As you know, I also worked with another prevention technology and transfer center on some training that is available for entry level or new professionals to this work. And I think the leadership that the PTTC showed by allowing us to develop prevention competencies specifically for higher education, because it is a different animal, honestly, than anywhere else in prevention. And so I thank you for developing these, but I also, I'm really excited that the field has started talking and getting excited about these. I know I've provided these to several campus administrators as they're developing new job descriptions and things like that. And so I just hope that for the competencies overall, people really see the value that they are, because our field has never had this. And I think it's a really important step forward. So,
well, it was visionary by some PTTC leaders, and then we are trying to bring it into reality. And then, and as I will close this, thanking you for your insights, for your richness, for a lot of the specifics, and for empowering our listeners to move forward and have that confidence to do so. You know, I think you did a lot of spotlighting on specific examples and opportunities and ways of thinking about this. I do want to, again, I know Rich thanked the PTTC, the Prevention Technology Transfer Center. It was the Mid-America one that orchestrated this particular one. You cited another one, but they provided the initial funding to build this guide that is available at no cost. I want to thank Rich Lucy and his colleagues at the DEA for their sponsorship and leadership with this webinar series and all of their good work. And as we close this program management segment, I leave everyone with the challenge to help bring this forward and make this a better reality for our colleges and universities and for our students and our future leaders of this country. So thank you, Joan. Thank you, Rich, and your DEA colleagues. Thank you, Mid-America PTTC, and thank you, the audience.